Hi and welcome to my channel. Lenses from the former German Democratic Republic can be fabulous quality and great value for money and really good on video, but they can suffer from some issues like stuck diaphragms. Let's sort out this Domiplan. The poor old Meyer Optic Görlitz Domiplan has always been a bit of a Cinderella lens. It never gets to go to the ball. To be fair, when I was buying my first Praktika back in the 70s, I really never considered the Domiplan. It was the cheapest lens of the bunch and I wanted a Tessar. Had I but known it, the Domiplan actually has quite an illustrious heritage. It's based on the Cook triplet, which was designed in the 1890s and has actually become a bit of a gold standard for projection lenses and has been used as a particularly nice portrait lens. It's not the sharpest at full aperture, but it's certainly very competent when it's down by a stop, and it's actually got superb colour rendition. Now to get on with what's wrong with this one. This is what a proper working aperture looks like. This is on my Carl Zeiss Tessar f2.8. And oh dear, as you can see, it's most of the time not popping back open, and at the end of this it was stuck completely. So yes, that will be oil on the diaphragm blades. Getting to the diaphragm in a Domiplan is actually not that difficult, but you will need something to take the front trim ring out, and contrary to what it says on some videos online, you don't pop this out with a screwdriver because you will damage it permanently. It's made of polycarbonate. You need to unscrew it carefully, and what I use is a rubber lens wrench set, as you see in the image. These are not super cheap. I think this set was about £30 from Amazon, but in the long run you'll save a small fortune stripping and cleaning and fixing lenses, because these are the proper way to get them apart. Now you can pull out the diaphragm setting ring. If you make sure that that little hole is upwards, then this ball bearing will not fall out and you won't lose it. Keep it carefully to one side and we'll continue. Now turn the lens round and unscrew this not very obvious back cover. It will be very, very stiff, so you'll need fairly strong hands for it. Now we need to remove the section of lens that contains the diaphragm release pin and the little assembly that turns that movement into horizontal movement to actually actuate the diaphragm blades. So you need to remove 3 little screws, 2 that you can see in this image and 1 round the back, and then you can lift that assembly off very carefully. Actually, one of the 3 little screws was missing and I found it later rolling about inside the lens, so it was quite a good thing I stripped the lens down anyway. When you lift the assembly off, two little springs will almost certainly pop out. Be very, very careful. There's one in a slug on each side of that alloy ring. At this stage, you do not want to turn either the alloy ring or the focus control. Otherwise, you might risk losing infinity focus. Keep that notch and that little slug and spring lined up. You don't need to touch that. Now you can take out the 3 screws that hold on the rear element stroke diaphragm cover. Now, as my granddad used to say, the dog can see the rabbit. And a pretty messy, gungy and disgusting rabbit it is too. I carefully removed the aperture blades with a pair of tweezers, being very careful not to touch them with my greasy and acid sweaty fingers. When I put everything back together, I will put a nice pair of nitrile gloves on and protect them from my finger grease. I'm washing them off in 99% isopropyl alcohol, or rubbing alcohol I think you call it in the US. After about 10 minutes in the isopropyl alcohol with a bit of agitation, I took them out and laid them on a paper towel to dry. Took about 5 minutes. Okay, reassembling the diaphragm blades is a pain. You lay them each one on top of the other with their pegs lined into the appropriate hole and slot on the top plate, but the last one has to be slid under the others. And a little tip which I found works is to use a sheet of white typing paper or copier paper over the top of all the blades that you've already put in place, just leaving the one that you're about to slide under, the last one. And that saves them all flying off and you having to start again. Don't ask me how I know. 3 times I reassembled the blades on this before I remembered the old typing paper trick. You can see here I'm partially actuating, stopping the blades down very, very gently in case they pop off, so that the blades are within that lighter matte grey circle. That's so as that the cover plate doesn't bite onto them and stop them from working when you screw it down. So you need to hold that little lever where it is while you position the cover plate, which is on the left of the image here with the rear element in it, on top. Just hold it there, it'll be fine, and then pop the screws back in. Now, I won't pretend that getting the diaphragm actuator plate back on, along with the rear cover, which is part of it, which goes back over those springs and slugs, is an easy matter. In fact, it's a complete bear. The way that worked in the end for me was putting one side on first by slightly tilting that cover plate that's in my left hand and trapping in the spring and slug on one side, and then putting the spring on the other in the little gap that remained and pushing it into place and holding it there with a watchmaker's screwdriver, and then fiddling things until the cover slid down. There's a little lip that spring has to go over, and it is a pain. I had to strip it about 3 times to get it right, but it eventually popped in there. It just requires patience. A word of caution: the springs are actually quite soft, and you can quite easily mangle the ends of them if you're not careful. I had to straighten one of the springs out after my first attempt at putting things together. Fairly easy to do over the shaft of a tiny screwdriver. You'll see here I've put the aperture control ring back on, remembering to get that little ball bearing back into the right place and to make sure it aligns in a little serrated track that you'll see in there. And now, once that's all tightened up, we will turn the lens around and put back on the rear cover plate, possibly not doing it up as tight as it was in the factory. And there we have it, working perfectly. Every time, everyone's a winner. I use this cute little lens on my video rig quite regularly. It's 100mm on my micro four thirds, and it just makes a nice slightly longer focus lens with a ton of visual character. So if you've enjoyed this video, perhaps you'll think about hitting the like button. And if you like my content, perhaps you'll think about subscribing. I have a Patreon channel that you can go to. The details are in the description, and a website, and there's lots of good stuff coming up. So until I see you again, you take care of yourselves, and don't forget, keep taking pictures.